Hello and welcome to Video Game Hangover. I'm Randy Dickinson and I'm in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
Hey, it's DJ Ross. It's me. It's DJ Ross from Mountain View, California.
Oh, DJ from Mountain View?
Yeah, it's that one. How are you?
Of the Mountain View Rosses?
Of the Mountain View Rosses? Not a lot of Mountain View Rosses that I'm aware of. Just the one.
No. It's one of Mountain View's first families.
Oh, well. Next week we'll have them on the show.
Each week on Video Game Hangover, we talk about the games that have been keeping us up at night. On this week's show, we're playing Metroid Prime and Resident Evil 4.
Oh, man.
Because
taking me back.
Yeah. And what year is it? 2022, right? I think.
2020. I thought you said 2002, maybe.
2002 would make more sense. Yes, that's when Metroid Prime.
But wait, that's before Resident Evil, though. We're getting a advanced copy of this exciting new game.
A preview build.
Yeah. Wow. You think there was like a big GameCube anniversary or something?
Yeah. Is there? I don't know.
I don't know.
All of the good GameCube games are coming to modern consoles.
Yeah, they're coming back. That's good. GameCube was GameCube was fine.
Yeah.
I don't know where you stand on the GameCube. Did you ever have a GameCube?
I did, yeah. I bought I have a distinct memory of buying a GameCube with my own money. I think it might have been one of the first consoles I did that with.
I know you weren't a PS2 guy, you had an Xbox, but
Correct.
GameCube
Yep.
was like kind of the wild card option during that generation.
Yeah. I wanted to play Luigi's Mansion.
Oh, so you're the one.
Yes, yeah. I'm always a rebel, always trying to ice skate uphill. Yeah. So, I think the GameCube was my portal to that. I remember that at some point, like, this is late in life, obviously, at GameStop, they were going for some very low price. So I distinctly recall getting a GameCube and a stack of games for maybe $150. Yeah.
Pretty good.
It was fine. It was a good time. I got a Wavebird controller.
Yeah, I got one of those.
Still one of my favorite controllers of all time.
Yeah. That was the first controller I can remember just like holding it and thinking, wow, this is great. Like I didn't really have strong opinions about controllers up to that point. But something about that Wavebird, or just the GameCube controller in general, was very comfortable.
This is the future.
It kind of was. It was like the first wireless controller that was good.
Yeah, this is true.
Remember that?
Because
you
they were
said
all
just like tether
infrared,
yourself
right? Yeah.
to the console. Couldn't sit more than like 6 feet from the TV. It was a disaster.
Yes, I remember those days too. Yeah. I'm old enough to remember a video game console where the controllers were attached to the device with a springy cable.
Oh yeah, I mean they were just always attached.
Yes. Yeah. But not even like a long cable, like a telephone. Oh, see here, I'm dated references now.
What kind of cord does a telephone have? What are you talking about, old man?
Wait, your cell phone has cords?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to stop talking.
I very quickly realized you'd have to explain corded telephones after corded console controllers.
Yeah. Yep. And if you don't understand what I'm talking about, just put this tape in your VCR and I can't explain old technology without referencing other old technology.
Yeah. Telephone cords.
Yeah. But the Wavebird was a great wireless controller. And even the shape of it was, I think, certainly ahead of where other controllers were at the time. There was not a lot of ergonomics happening in video game controllers then.
Yeah.
So the fact that one felt so good and worked really well was a pleasant surprise from Nintendo.
Yeah, man, the GameCube controller, so weird, but it worked so well for GameCube games. Another example of Nintendo, their weird insistence on being slightly different really paid off with that thing.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know how desperate I am for like tons of old GameCube games, but as long as we are cherry picking, Metroid Prime seems like a good way to go, and probably you would agree that Resident Evil 4 is.
Well, I was like, these are maybe two of the best GameCube games. Why would you need another one?
So are you playing a newly updated, refreshed version of Resident Evil 4? Or are you playing the old one on the GameCube?
Well, I don't know if you heard this, but there's a new Resident Evil 4 coming out.
No.
I can barely keep track of these things at this point. A couple of things led to this. Led to me playing this week, which was I just kind of wanted to play Resident Evil 4. I was on that weird Resident Evil kick last summer or whenever that was. I was playing all the bad ones. And at some point I just thought, I should, I'd treat myself. I'll play a good one. And it's been a while since I played Resident Evil 4, so I just put that on my PS4 or whatever. And just kind of sat on it for a while. But then they've also been developing this remake in the style of the Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes that have come out over the last few years. And that's gotten me a little nervous because as highly regarded as those other two remakes have been, I was I feel like Resident Evil 4 might still hold up pretty well. I mean, I know people have issues with the controls because they are from a different era of video games. Yeah. But I feel like my memory of that game, it does what it set out to do so well that I kind of feel like you could just put out Resident Evil 4 today and you would play it. And God knows they have attempted to. Just every time a new console pops up, you can get Resident Evil 4 on it.
Yeah, I think that's my impression of Resident Evil 4 is that, a lot of games sort of come and have their moment and then sort of go dormant for a while, disappear. I mean, that's certainly the case with most Metroid games, is that there seems to be sort of long gaps in between Nintendo sort of reminding the world that Metroid is a thing. And that has never really happened with Resident Evil 4. Of all the Resident Evil games, I feel like that one continues to sort of be iterated on and make its way onto new consoles and new devices and stuff like that. So how do you even sort of navigate your way back to what OG version 1.0 of Resident Evil 4 is, because it's been updated for so many consoles and devices and across different platforms and stuff like that. So it's, yeah, I don't know what the original version of you say the original version of Resident Evil 4, what does that even mean anymore?
Yeah. I actually played that one. That was the GameCube one. I mean, but originally, I'm not playing it this week, but I was surprised as I was reading up on this, just how many sort of different lenses it's been sort of refracted through all these ports since then. Because back then even there was the GameCube one. And then very shortly after that, there was the PS2 version, which they already started making changes to. I believe in terms of difficulty and other weird little adjustments like that. And then quickly after that, you had the Wii one. And then it just started going all over the place. But I was trying to figure out, what version am I actually playing here? Because this is the whatever version is on PS4. And I honestly couldn't tell you. I think it probably is most closely connected to the PS2 one, but for all intents and purposes, it's Resident Evil 4. It's very familiar. Oh, but anyway, so there's a remake coming out. I felt just to prepare myself for it, because it's been quite a while since I played Resident Evil 4. I would just spend a little time with the original. I thought, I'll go through and maybe I won't play the whole thing, but I'll at least play up through the very first section where you go into the village and the guy with the chainsaw is there, and then they ring the church bell and everybody goes away. So I did, and I've been continuing a little bit past that, and man, at least to me, this game is still great. There's definitely some weirdness with the control scheme, but I've tried to stick with the classic controls as much as possible. This version provides a bunch of different options for you, where you can adjust where certain buttons are on the controller and or where certain functions are rather, and you can make a couple tweaks to the aiming. It does not give you the thing that I think everybody complains about, which is you can aim and move around and shoot all at the same time. You still
walk and shoot at the same time.
Yeah, it's still got the tank controls, and you have to plant yourself whenever you have to actually shoot your gun. But that's fine. I think that's fine.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that is your association with Resident Evil 4, right? I didn't try Resident Evil 4 until much, much later than the GameCube era. And at that point, I was conditioned to have, twin stick controls on video game shooters and expected I would be able to walk around and shoot at the same time. And it was super frustrating to me and kind of a deal breaker that I couldn't play Resident Evil 4 that way.
It's a bit of a shock if you come to this after, you've been just inundated with like twin stick controls, like modern twin stick controls.
Yeah.
But like you're saying, it works, like it does what it does very well. And it's really designed, if you like, to be played this way where you are not able to move and shoot at the same time. And it sounds like I'm being a bit of an apologist for like tank controls. But I really do think like they set out to make this very specific game, and it's actually important that you cannot move and shoot. And plus there are a bunch of other weird little control quirks in this, which I feel like are largely intentional, and they just sort of contribute to like the level of tension that you experience in this game, because it's kind of like it's very well known for moving away from the like pure survival horror into more of an action game.
Mm-hmm.
But going back to it, it's still surprisingly tense, which is funny because it's not really my association with it. I just think of it as like Leon vaulting over fences and doing a little quick draw with his laser scope on a bunch of zombies coming towards him. I think of it as like a very, very much in sort of the action side of the spectrum. But it does have a lot of just very like spooky moments in the combat. You're not like drowning in bullets and ammo and anything, especially at the start of the game. But you really have to sort of like think your way out of a lot of the early encounters because you have a limited number of supplies, and you're not the most agile special agent. It's really kind of amazing to come back to and to realize that it still feels really good to play.
Well, I would imagine, particularly in light of having played Resident Evil 5 and 6 not too long ago, right? This must be like a whole new world.
Yeah, it's funny, like Resident Evil 5, could you move and shoot in that one? I think you could, right?
I think you could, yeah, if I remember correctly. Yeah,
but it felt more like Resident Evil 4 than, I don't know, like Uncharted or, drop in your completely modern third-person shooter of choice here.
Right.
Resident Evil 6 definitely felt like, very modern third-person shooter. But I think, man, there's just something about the way the controls are set up in this that I think works so well. And it was kind of awkward readjusting to it, because how does it work? It's like, while there is an option for you to use sort of like the trigger to aim and then the other trigger to shoot, I am using the options where I think it's like it's right shoulder button to bring up your gun, and then it's square to shoot. And I realized that's because, so this was designed for the GameCube controller, so you were using one of the shoulder buttons, and the giant green A button was kind of the like content sexual. Oh my goodness, that's not what I wanted to say. I was going for
the context.
Either context sensitive or contextual. And something completely different came out. But anyway, you just had this one contextual button that did everything.
Mm-hmm.
So as weird as it is playing a game on PlayStation using that sort of control scheme, I just thought, well, let's see how long I can tolerate this. But it actually kind of works really well. Or at least to me, where I'm very familiar with it from back in the day. So it's sort of like just coming back to it, like getting back on a bike or whatever. So that was kind of surprising. I was fully expecting to, try the dual trigger setup and see how that works. But I'm actually liking sort of the weird, like GameCube mutant controls quite a bit.
Do you have an updated GameCube controller with a giant green button in the center, or?
No, I'm just using like the PlayStation controller. And I wish I had a GameCube controller. That'd be really interesting. But no, it's so funny playing this and realizing that it was sort of designed for the GameCube controller, because like I was saying, the green button, or like the square button in this case, it just does everything. Like you can go through all the menus with it, and all of the sort of interactions in the game are all just a square button. So it's kind of interesting because like a lot of games after this, a lot of shooters especially sort of settled into more or less a de facto control scheme. Like you have your aiming and shooting on the triggers, and reload is square or X button or whatever like that. It's just funny to come back to it, and Resident Evil 4 is still kind of doing its own thing.
Like I said, it didn't make the connection that it was one of the game where you hit a button to pull up your gun. So I mean, obviously, that sort of at some point in shooters that becomes like iron sights. Yeah, or if you think about kind of old like light gun games where you have the foot pedal to duck behind boxes and stuff like that, that's almost in a way a variation on that pop up to shoot and stuff like that. So it's it definitely feels a little more experimental. It doesn't quite feel like it was released in the era where we all had a sort of a common language about what shooter controllers feel like.
Yeah, well, this was like more or less the first sort of third person shooter, or like cinematic third-person shooter in this style. So I feel like they were trying to invent something that didn't really exist.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of funny how it's basically how the previous Resident Evil games would work, because you would be walking around and had to raise your gun. But I guess it just comes down to the camera angle in this is the reason it feels so different than the previous ones.
That over the shoulder.
Yeah. But it's stuff like that, I think, sort of... it's just like another great example of how well this was designed as an action game. And the fact it still feels, like I was saying, it's still very tense as you're playing it, because you can't just run and gun. You have to really, find a spot where you're not going to be, ambushed from the side or something like that. Because when you draw your gun, the camera kind of like pulls in a little bit and you lose a little bit of your peripheral vision. And one thing I really like to do in this is I feel like all the pro Resident Evil 4 players do this move. You shoot like a zombie once in the face and they stagger a bit. And then you run up and do one of Leon's crazy roundhouse kicks, which puts them on the ground. And then you sort of follow them and you just start stabbing them with your knife while they're on the ground. Which is it's what you want to do on the harder difficulties when you don't have as much ammo. So you're just using the knife the whole time. But as you were doing this, I realized going through this whole process, especially when you've got the camera sort of pointed at the ground and you're just stabbing the zombie with the knife, is you really can't see anything that's happening around you, which I think just ratchets up the amount of tension and sort of suspense that they're these zombies slowly walking towards you. You can hear them sort of taunting you and telling them that they're sneaking up behind you. So it's how many more stabs can I get in with this knife before I have to, get up and reposition and, rinse and repeat. That sort of stuff.
Right.
But it's amazing, man. The encounters in this are still so good. It's you're making so many little interesting decisions, whether it's where to stand or how many shots you can get off with your gun before it's time to switch to another one, or whether you have time to reload. Just all that stuff. It just makes it so interesting.
I feel like, and I've not played all of this game. I got turned off pretty early on. So I don't think I have a sense of where Resident Evil fits into sort of the scale of Resident Evil games. Is that I feel like my association with the series sometimes is that sometimes they can be a little more horror, and sometimes they skew a little more, maybe too much action. Where do you sort of feel like, if you agree that that's a Resident Evil scale, where do you feel like Resident Evil 4 sort of lands on it? Because everything you're describing sounds like action.
It is very action. It's very very light horror, maybe only in atmosphere. Although there are a few sections later on, especially where you'll be in a creepy castle or in a dungeon or something, and there is a real possibility that something will jump out from around the next corner. But something it really loses from the previous installments is you just have way more supplies in this. So it's completely viable, unless you're just a terrible shot, to shoot and kill every single enemy you run into, which was, maybe not the best thing in the previous ones. In fact, maybe it wasn't even possible because you just didn't have enough bullets.
Right.
So you rarely have to actually run away from stuff, at least on the normal difficulty.
Right. And then I have memories of playing Resident Evil, either 5 or 6, 5 and 6. And it's, basically you have an AK with unlimited ammo Oh, and also so do the zombies. They have machine guns and rifles as well, and they're shooting at you.
That's Resident Evil 6. I kind of like low-key love Resident Evil 6 because it is just the stupidest action game. It's like the most generic, like it's no longer Resident Evil at that point.
Yeah.
But I've definitely had moments where I'm like, oh, I just want to jump into a game and shoot zombies with a big gun or something like that. And that is Resident Evil 6.
Yeah, I feel like Resident Evil kind of lost their way a little bit at the end there.
Yeah, I mean, they were trying to do a lot with that game. I don't feel like it's a very good Resident Evil game. But it certainly is a video game where you can shoot stuff, so sometimes
and if
that's
you find
enough.
that fun, yeah.
Yeah. Resident Evil 5 landed somewhere in between 4 and 6, which is weird. I don't remember really enjoying that game that much.
Yeah, Resident Evil 5, it just feels icky for other reasons. It's pretty problematic, I think, in a lot of ways.
No, it's got that going on for it. It had the weird, like, forced co-op system where you had, like, an AI partner, which I was not a huge fan of. That was in 6 as well, but it wasn't quite as much of an issue as I remember it being in 5.
Yeah. Which one, I think it was 5, had the just out of nowhere, completely unprovoked, random, like, button press challenges?
Oh, they've been doing that since 4. Yeah, 4.
Oh, is that a thing from 4? Okay, thanks, 4.
I feel like 4 kind of popularized that.
Oh.
So, I mean, yeah, it was a little silly. They really started to overdo it in 5 and 6.
QTEs, that's what they're called in video game parlance, quick time events.
Yeah. That's still in here. That feels a little dated, but there definitely aren't as many of them as there were in the later ones. So that's a relief.
Yeah. So it does feel like it's kind of in a good place. Like it is certainly better than the 2 games that immediately followed it.
I think so. Yeah, I think it just has a clearer idea of what it wants to be. I feel like with 5 and especially 6, they started chasing more of just, the action-based third-person shooter.
Yeah.
And, a little bit of just the online co-op shooter as well, having that partner system. But 4, it's just like, it's a single-player action game. They kind of eschewing the survival elements, and because of that, they can just make a really amazing sort of third-person shooter. And like the other thing I really love about it, and this is something it also lost, or the series lost with the later ones, is it's still so silly, and it's in the perfect like zone where you can't tell how much of it is like intentional, because a lot of it feels like the first 3 Resident Evil games were very silly. But you get the impression that a lot of that was because it was just, an earlier era of video games that, maybe they didn't have, they weren't able to spend as much time on like localization or professional voice actors and that sort of stuff. So they just came off very campy and weird, which kind of worked for the setting. But then by the time 4 comes around, you just feel like, well, this still feels very familiar, but maybe it could be better. Like a lot of other games at this point are doing a much better job with sort of like the cinematic presentation and the performances. But at 4, you still have Leon just like dropping weird one-liners, which are just not consistent with the character he was supposed to be in 2. And there's just so much weird dialogue all over the place. But it's great. For some reason, it just like works with the whole rest of the game. It like doesn't take itself too seriously ever, which I really appreciate. And that brings me to the remake. Yeah.
I was just saying, in light of all of this, it feels like this thing has aged, for your money, pretty gracefully. Is a remake really necessary?
Well, yeah, that's what I've been asking for as soon as they announced this thing. And in fact, before they announced it, when people were like, okay, well, now they've got Resident Evil 2 and 3, shiny new remakes of those. 4 must be next. And I was just thinking, like, can you really remake Resident Evil 4? Like, I'm sure people want some updated control options for it as, like, bare minimum. But can you make the rest of the game and have it still feel like Resident Evil 4 did? Because, I don't know, did you play the 2 and 3 remakes?
I did not, no.
Okay.
No, I've never actually played Resident Evil 2 or 3. I've played 1, 4, 5, and 6. Yeah.
I only played the demos of each one. because I played the originals. I don't know if I needed a new version of those where it's like even more sort of like horror based. Plus, there's like there's the big monster chasing you the whole time in both of those now. So
yeah,
not a huge fan of that.
I'm intrigued. I mean, I'm excited that they've gone more horror, but I feel like I've been burned on Resident Evil games enough that I wasn't like super excited day one. Must get into this.
Yeah. Resident Evil 2, I was like, yeah, sure, make that more horror, because that was well before they started sort of down the action path. Resident Evil 3 I liked because it was more of an action game. But still, I was like, I don't know if I need to play this one. Or the remake, that is. But now they've got the 4 remake on the way. It's like imminent. And a lot of it was like, I'm sure like with the updated controls, it'll be fine. Like it'll just be another sort of third-person shooter at this point. If it plays like the demos of 2 and 3, it'll be fine. But like, what are they gonna do tonally? Like, is Leon still gonna be like this weird sort of action hero? Is he still gonna be spouting the one-liners? There are all these weird characters that you run into later in the game. One of them, sorry for Resident Evil 4 spoilers, at some point he just like activates this giant sort of robot statue of himself, which chases you through an area. And it's like, okay, this is sort of like the pinnacle of how corny this game gets. I can't wait to see if this makes it into the remake, because this is just like, this is so weird. But as one trailer for this came out after another, it seems like they started including more sort of like the silly and over the top stuff in these, and it wasn't going to be quite as grounded as maybe 2 and 3 were. Like there was a trailer that came out showing like Leon doing the roundhouse kicks, and they had the classic like zombie suplex in one of them. So I thought, well, okay, maybe there's hope for the giant, like, robot boss or something like that. Maybe that'll be in there. And then, this is crazy. So the night I sat down to finally start playing Resident Evil 4, they released a demo of this remake that was basically the section that I set out to play in the original. So it was like the original, it was the start of the game up to that very first village sequence. So I just thought, well, this is perfect. I'll just play do what I was going to do in the original version, and then I'll hop right over to the remake and see how this goes.
Right.
So I played it. I played 2 Resident Evil 4s this week.
Damn.
And I'm a little kind of mixed on how well the remake works. First of all, it's very familiar if you've played the intro to Resident Evil 4. Because you start out sort of like in the woods, and you're heading into this village for the first time. You run into what looks like an abandoned house with just one guy in it, and it turns out he's been infected by whatever the parasite is in Resident Evil 4. So initial experience is very sort of accurate to the original. And sure enough, Leon still has a bunch of his crazy moves. He's got like the I don't know if I actually did a suplex on somebody, but you can still do the same sort of like shoot them in the face, rush up and roundhouse kick them, and then stab them a bunch of times if you want. So that still works for the most part. Something I noticed though is that in general, the controls feel a little floatier than they did in the original version, which I guess is maybe a carryover from like whatever engine the 2 and 3 remakes are running on. I mean, because this looks very similar.
That would make sense, yeah.
Especially coming directly from essentially the PS2 version. It was just like, it didn't feel one-to-one with how I was used to this game feeling.
Can you move and shoot at the same time?
Oh, of course. Yeah, you can. Oh, this was something that I thought was hilarious. So when I first started it up, instead of just jumping into the game, I went into the options and looked at the control schemes, because I was just like, okay, how are they going to have you controlling Leon in this? Like, are they going to give everybody the controls that they've been asking for all these years? And sure enough, the default control scheme is like what you'd expect, basically. So you can move and aim and shoot all at the same time. You use the triggers to sort of pull up your gun. I don't know if you can blind fire in this. I think you still need to sort of like have the gun at the ready if you want to fire. So that's kind of interesting. But I was sort of tabbing through all these different control schemes, and I swear, like, my eyes probably bugged out, because there's one in there, Like, as you're going through, there's a description for each one, and it's like, this is a control scheme for people who like playing third-person shooters and that sort of stuff. And there's one, like the last one on the list is, it says, this is a control scheme for people who are fans of Resident Evil 4 2005. And I thought, oh my god, is this the one that's gonna, it's got the big green A button in the middle of the controller, and I'm just gonna be pressing that for everything? I'd be pressing the X button to run. And it's not quite, it's not a one-to-one thing with the GameCube controller. It's not, I don't think you're pressing square to shoot, which is unfortunate. What does it do? Oh, so by default, run is on R1. It's like the shoulder button in this, which it's like a very modern sort of control scheme. And that sort of retro Resident Evil 4 control scheme just puts it on the X button, which I feel like is kind of a mix. I think if I could go either way on those controls. But for the sake of just experiencing Resident Evil 4 as sort of in an updated context, I went with the new default controls. And it seemed fine, except for, sort of the weird floatiness of it. The other thing is that, so it's definitely not designed around the big A button. It feels like any other game now where you like walk up to something and it'll pop up a little prompt over it, which, it's like every other game works that way. But on the GameCube, it would just put a huge button at the bottom of the screen to let you know that, there's an interaction that you could do. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that was kind of the way to go. Because in a lot of these cases, whether it's, he's opening up a cabinet or something to see what's inside, or you're doing the famous sort of like melee follow-up, instead of having this big like blinking button on the screen to tell you what's going on, you just kind of have to look. Like a little button will pop up over probably the zombie who is like staggering at this point. So the button prompt is going all over the screen, sort of like tracing along with his movements.
Yeah. And
I just find it so hard to read. It's like, okay, so the zombie is staggered. If you can see what the prompt says on the screen and like push the button in time, she'll do the move you want to do, rather than just sort of like telling you, like, right now, push this button and you will do that melee follow-up.
And is it a different button every time, or is like, I don't know, square always the takedown button?
Oh, it's always the same button.
Oh, okay.
So after a while, you will just instinctively hit the square button. But the first few times, I was just like, what is the button? It's like, it's not the A button. Is it the attack button? Because sometimes, like, you can do there's like a knife counter in this, and that is one of the trigger buttons, which is just a whole other thing. Also, so I'm playing this on PS5, and this is just an issue I've had with PS5 games in general. I don't know if you've noticed this, but at some point, I guess for whatever reason, Sony put out this mandate that whenever you show UI in a PS5 game, it has to be all white. Like, you can't have the sort of traditional PlayStation colored buttons anymore.
Oh.
And so, like, none of the reactive prompts in this have any color in them. They're just all these sort of, like, white prompts that pop up and I find very difficult to read.
Oh, no. I definitely didn't catch that. That's interesting.
And it's weird coming from, I'm playing the PS4 version of Resident Evil 4, or like the original, on the PS5, and that, because it's a PS4 game, it still has the colored button prompts. But like switch over to switch over to PS5, and everything is just monochrome. And I feel like it's a real step back. And it's not the fault of this remake, because that is just how every PS5 game works. But I feel like it is just not good for like usability.
Yeah, it sounds like it would be an accessibility problem.
Yeah, no, I think it really is. But anyway, so
I've never heard of that. That's interesting. I can't remember the last time I played a game on a PS5. Honestly, probably what was the game with the cat? Stray last summer. So it's been maybe 6-7 months. But yeah, I don't know that I've noticed that. That's interesting. I'll have to look for that.
Yeah, it's weird. Like I was talking about, like I've been playing Like a Dragon Ishin and doing the karaoke mini game. And all the button prompts, it's like a rhythm game. So you have all the buttons all over the screen and they're all white. And I was looking up like footage from the PS4 version of that, because that came out on multiple platforms. And the PS4 one just has PS4 buttons in the correct colors. So I was like, oh.
Weak.
Seems like a downgrade.
Bad move, Sony.
But anyway, so just these weird sort of hang-ups around the controls and sort of the visual presentation have got me thinking, like, well, it just doesn't feel as good as the classic Resident Evil 4, but maybe that's just something I will adapt to after a few hours of playing this. I'm really, really curious to see how silly it gets. The demo is definitely darker than how I remember the GameCube version playing. Not quite as many one-liners. He does say the bingo line at the end, which was incredible.
What's the bingo line?
Do you know this line?
That, or
no,
is it a spoiler.
So at the end of the big confrontation in the village, he's just getting swarmed by zombies, and the guy with the chainsaw is there. And at some point, the church bell rings, and they all sort of shuffle off. And Leon is standing alone in the village square, and he's like, where's everybody going? Bingo? And it's just a dumb line, which has become a classic over the years. And there was this big question, like, okay, are they going to bring that back for the sequel? Or not the sequel, for the remake? Because you have the same sort of sequence, like you're getting attacked by zombies and the church bell rings. And it turns out the cutscene this time is so drawn out. There's just so much more time, the camera lingering on these zombies slowly walking away. And they walk into this church and you see them close the door slowly as they're peering out. And I was like, wow, they're really dragging this out this time. Is he going to say the line or not? I had to know. And it feels like they waited for the last possible second, as the screen was starting to fade to black, he says the line. It's oh my God. Okay, great. So the silliness is back on the table.
Yeah.
So that was very heartening.
They knew they had to include it, but they wanted to wait potentially long enough for some gamers to have already skipped the cutscene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now I'm just I don't know what to think about the rest of it. I don't know how crazy they're going to get with it. I really hope that they, appreciate sort of the silliness of the original and preserve more of it when this eventually comes out.
It doesn't sound like that's appreciated.
What, the silliness? I think people love it.
Yeah, I would by you, maybe by gamers and the meme factory that is the internet. But maybe it feels like somebody on the dev side was how do we cut the goofiness out of this and make it a hardcore proper Resident Evil game?
I don't know. I mean,
no,
I've seen arguments on both sides where they're I really hope this is more horror oriented because that's how they prefer Resident Evil. Or you get the other side saying Resident Evil 4 was an action game, so they don't want to take that out of it. So I think just the fact that they've included a couple of lines like this is reassuring. And, we'll see if that giant robot statue shows up.
Right. And also that you've played kind of one of the more original versions of it and the demo of the remake, and you've played kind of the same sections in both. Do you feel like the remake is pretty true to kind of the flow and the characters and interactions and scenarios in the original, or is the remake very much kind of going its own way?
It's surprisingly faithful to the original.
Oh, cool.
I'm sure they plan to mix it up a little bit. I kind of wishing I had played through the full 2 and 3 remakes at this point to know how much those actually changed the formula.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm sure it won't be 1-to-1. There'll be some differences in there. But at the same time, I'm sort of okay, why? I've got the original right here. Why don't I just continue playing that? What's so much better about this new one besides the fact that it looks much shinier? So I don't know, but that is sort of my ongoing question whenever they roll out any sort of remake is why should I personally play this if I played, the original to death? I appreciate that it's making it more accessible to new people. Or to new audiences, whether it was because you just missed it the first time around or you couldn't get with the controls for whatever reason. So I'm glad that is happening. But I don't know if I'm just I need to play this immediately or I need this to exist at all in my life.
Right. Well, I don't think Resident Evil 4 suffers from an availability problem.
Right. Yeah, that is definitely true.
I mean, yeah, maybe the controls are a little antiquated, but you can't argue that it doesn't run on most modern video game technology. So
yeah, that's actually like whenever they announce a remake of something else, that is the thing that makes me the most excited. If it's a game that you just can't really play anymore, or is very hard to play, like the Tactics Ogre that just came out. Yeah. Like unless you had a PSP or Live Alive, especially. I mean, that was a whole other situation. But like the new version of Tactics Ogre is on Steam, which means it'll probably just be available forever until Square Enix like takes it down to put out the next remake or whatever.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, a lot of the benefit or the immediate benefit I see to these remakes is just making stuff more available. So that's good. Although, like you said, weird exception in Resident Evil 4's case where you probably can just play it on whatever consoles you have right now.
Yeah. On your, I don't know, pick a home appliance, your air fryer.
Yeah. Did they make a Resident Evil 4 port for the 3DS? I don't know. That might be one of the only platforms that like doesn't have it.
Yeah. There were quite a few Resident Evil games on the 3DS though. There's the Revelations games and stuff like that.
Yeah. I guess they were busy with other stuff.
Yeah. I don't think 4 ever made it to the 3DS.
Yeah, missed opportunity with shop closing down.
Yeah. But well, interesting. I'm kind of interested in the demo. I'll have to check that out. I didn't know that had snuck out into the world, so I have to give that a whirl.
Yeah. I mean, I think, like you said, you only play a little bit of the original. I think you would be into this.
Yeah. I don't remember where I bailed, but I don't think I lasted long in Resident Evil 4.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the control scheme definitely sort of puts up a fight. Oh, man, it's so... like, I'm grateful that the original still exists. Like, that's not going away when the remake comes out, because I just love seeing those giant button prompts. I love kind of like the sillier, slightly like goofier version of Leon. That's the other thing. Like in the remake, he just looks like a different guy. He looks like they found an actor who looked as close to Leon as possible from the GameCube version, and he's the guy who's in this. Because I guess it's based on whatever he looked like in the 2 remake.
Oh, that would make sense.
But man, it's just not the same guy.
Hmm.
So weirdness.
I always thought Resident Evil 4 was a pretty good-looking game, though. I don't think it suffers from, very antiquated graphics or visuals or character building and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think, at the time, I remember being pretty impressed by how good that game looked.
Yeah, I don't think
it's, yeah.
By the time it was like 2005, by that time, games were starting to look like pretty good. You can go back and play something from that era, and yeah, it doesn't look as great as the stuff coming out today, but like it's still totally playable. I don't think you'll just be like, oh, the graphics, I can't deal with it.
Yeah,
just burning my eyes or whatever.
I can't even look at you.
Yeah, as long as you're not staring really closely at the floor textures or whatever. Like it's totally fine.
It's like a magic eye, though. You have to stare at it, and eventually you can see.
Oh, these are leaves. I got it. But anyway, so yeah, it comes out soon, I guess. Maybe I will have the original wrapped up by then. Yeah, the original is like so much longer than I remember it being. There are just all these little sections I forgot about. So we'll see if I can get through it in the next couple of weeks.
And you have had a lot of Resident Evil this week. Yeah.
It's actually been so long since I played this one. It's been quite a while, so it's super fun coming back to it. Like I said, I'm glad it still exists. And cool. I hope people are into the remake as well.
Nice. I've been playing the remastered version of Metroid Prime, which just recently kind of stealth dropped on the Switch.
Yeah, not really a remake, more of the remaster, like you're saying.
Yes, yeah.
People get real particular about what you call these things now.
I think this is based on original Metroid Prime code. I don't think this was one of those built from the ground up kind of scenarios.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Metroid Prime is. I was
going to say this is not quite as prolific as Resident Evil 4, but it hasn't gotten 0 re-releases. It's come out on a couple different things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there was I believe it was the Wii, right? Had the Metroid Prime trilogy.
Yeah.
That eventually came to the Wii, and then all of those became available for download and play on the Wii U, which probably not a lot of people took advantage of.
Yeah. Right.
But since the launch of the Switch, there has not really been an accessible first-person Metroid Prime game.
Yeah.
And until just recently. I mean, I think this has kind of been like a long speculated, long rumored thing is that, okay, Nintendo has, Switch remakes of the Prime trilogy queued up, ready to go. They're just waiting for Metroid Prime 4 to happen, which has been endlessly delayed and then had to restart production at some point. It still feels like some science fiction scenario that may or may not ever happen. So yeah, it has not been easy to find a physical copy of Metroid Prime, let alone a device that can play it in quite a while. So it's cool that the original of that trilogy now exists on the Switch, available initially only for download and play on your Switch from the eShop. But there is a physical version in the world now that you can buy if you're lucky enough to be able to find one.
Yeah.
Because as usual, I think Nintendo tends to underestimate the appeal of Metroid games.
Oh, you got them. But they've said this is they're working on the supply issues. This is not going to be like the NES Mini sort of situation,
right? Where if you can't find it, you never will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what is your history with this game? Because I know you've played a little of it.
I've played a little of it. I had a copy of the Metroid Prime trilogy for the Wii, and I've played a little bit of all of those games, but I've never played one to the end. I think I've played Metroid Prime 3 the most.
Oh.
That was the one I think I spent the most amount of time with. I played enough of the original Metroid Prime that as I was playing it on the Switch just recently, stuff felt familiar. Like, oh, I remember this. I remember the beginning. And the hook at the beginning of Metroid Prime is that you start with a fully functional Samus. You've got access to everything. Her suit is fully upgraded. She's jacked. She crawls out of the ship at the beginning and she's a house. And I'm like, wow, damn. And yeah, you've got, a full arm cannon, all the visors, you can do all the things. Ball mode is immediately available to you. Yeah, it feels pretty badass. And then they take it all away. And I was like, oh, I remember that too. I do. And you have to start back at scratch and then eventually sort of find all your upgrades and get Samus back to the point where she's, kicking ass again.
Where do you stand on Nintendo having to find like plot justifications for resetting Samus at the start of each game? Because I know people get very upset about this.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine. I mean, it's what I expect from a Samus, from a Metroid game, excuse me. To a certain degree, like there is joy in the hunt of being able to find the energy tanks and the cannon upgrades and, unlocking sphere mode and all that other stuff. Like it feels comfortable. It feels like, this is, this is the Metroid experience that I'm accustomed to. In the same way that, the structure of a Zelda game felt very sort of familiar, despite Nintendo having gone to that well for so long. I didn't know you could do it any other way until Breath of the Wild came out. So until there is, some format of a Metroid game that breaks that and feels awesome, I guess, the thrill is in the hunt in those early hours anyways of getting yourself back to a place where you can sort of play a little more comfortably.
Yeah. I just think it's hilarious that people get so bent out of shape about it because they're just like, oh, she should have, all her missiles and everything. And why do they have to keep writing it out and finding these new contrived explanations for it? I'm like, well, it's going to be a very fun game. You just started with everything every single time.
Yeah, I don't know. And in a lot of ways, if you think about the way that sort of Nintendo structures their games, they're generally not about story. They're generally about, tools and tricks and abilities. And you're not drawn in by the plot. The plot is okay, the bad guy took the princess. You have to rescue her.
It's like, go hunt down the bad guy.
Sure. And the joy is, stomping on all the bad guys and collecting as many coins as you can, and et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of these are, in a lot of ways, Nintendo games are remakes of previous Nintendo games.
Mm-hmm.
But there's something comfortable about that. I don't yearn for, character development and giant plot contrivances and et cetera from a Metroid game. But mostly maybe because I've never been served that before. I think they tried that with Other M, and most of us hated it. So, yeah, I think there's something to be said for Metroid Prime not deviating too significantly from what I feel like sort of the structure of a Metroid game should feel like. I mean, it also represents a pretty dramatic shift to first person, which Metroid games had not been up to that point. So that alone at the time had to feel pretty groundbreaking.
I don't know if groundbreaking is the right word or how I would have described it at the time. It was more like extremely contentious.
Oh, was it really? Okay, I don't think I have a memory of that at the time.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, when the word first got out, they're like, oh, there's a new Metroid coming out, and it's going to be a first-person shooter. Like, people just lost their minds. Like, what are you even, like, what? How does that make any sense?
Is it a first-person shooter, though? Like...
Well, that's the thing. Like, I was going to let you, give your impressions, but I definitely have thoughts on that.
It is in first person, and you do shoot things, but it feels like a puzzle game. It feels like, I think it has more in common with Portal than it does Call of Duty.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, while Samus does have a cannon on the end of her arm, and you do have tons of monsters coming after you at points in the game, Metroid Prime, I think, suffers from enemy respawning in a way that I find really frustrating and feels super antiquated. Like, I just left this room and I have to go back for a thing I forgot, and now all the monsters I killed are back. That is annoying. But the joy of this game, and the thing I think that Metroid Prime does a lot more than putting you in a room with a bunch of monsters, is putting you in a room with puzzles you have to suss out, sort of using Samus's abilities. And that feels cool and challenging and super kind of on brand for Metroid. And I think that sort of leads me down sort of the direction of thinking that, occasionally you are in a first person shooter, but mostly you're in a first person puzzle game.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's about where I settled on it, where I've always thought of it not as a shooter, but it's like, it's a first-person, like, adventure game, I guess.
Sure.
And at least in the GameCube version, you have this lock-on, so you're really not even doing sort of, like, what you expect to do in a more shooting-heavy game, which is a lot of, like, fine
you don't have
aiming.
To be good at aiming in this,
Yeah, which I thought was just brilliant, because it feels like a Metroid game somehow, despite this ridiculous sort of perspective shift. Like, you're just doing Metroid stuff. You're not doing, like, I guess, like, Half-Life would have been the big first-person shooter around then. Like Half-Life 2? No, it was a little after this.
Yeah. Yeah, it is not a significant change in structure or plotting from previous Metroid games. It's just a shift in perspective, I think.
Yeah. Which I just thought was incredible that they were able to pull it off.
I think that's really cool. Yeah, I agree. I think it's interesting to me and striking too, particularly playing Metroid Prime now in 2023, like how quiet and alone you are in a way that I don't expect like modern shooters to be. I feel like most modern first person or third person video games are very chatty. There's always somebody in your ear. There's always people on your team. There's always somebody giving you directions.
Oh, yeah.
You have none of that in Metroid Prime. Not a word is spoken, I think, for hours of this game. And you are, in a lot of ways, sort of left to figure things out. There is some tutorial. You're not sort of like completely off map. But it's not like Samus is having sort of long-winded conversations with anybody. She's very much by herself. And there's a lot of sort of context clues and a lot of like, you have the whole visor where you do research and you scan the environment and catalog things. And so a lot of sort of the plot beats and story progression and the history of what's happening on the planet that you crash landed on and yada, yada comes from exploration. And not from, the explainy guy who tells you what's going on. So I kind of dig that. I like that it is, and maybe that was sort of an affectation of a limitation of the hardware at the time. But I feel like that's aged really gracefully, and it feels like sort of counter programming to where, action adventure games are in 2023, in that unless you have 6 billion gigabytes of spoken dialogue in your game, you're not really a AAA game.
Right.
It's cool that Metroid kind of leaves you alone. I dig that. I think that there's definitely an argument for that, particularly in something that is going to like make you isolated and by yourself and far away from home on an alien planet.
Yeah, I think that is just like that. What you just said is the core of every Metroid game. You're just lost on an alien world, and it's just you. There's like no backup. There's nobody talking to you. Like you're a bounty hunter, right? Mm-hmm. So you're just trying to unravel the mystery on your own for the most part.
Yeah,
and it works so well in this.
Yeah, and there is, and again, I sort of appreciate this too. There's a lot that happens, and maybe it's goofy. Maybe I some of it is goofy. But there's a lot that happens kind of in the first hour of Metroid Prime. You're like, what the hell is that? What is going on? What is that character? And you don't get any context. You don't get any explanation. It's just, you're trying to piece it together. And I'm like, well, that's kind of fun. That's a lot of that has a lot of faith, I think, in the audience to like, go with us. Trust me. This is going someplace.
Wait, what are you talking about? What happens? Like, I can't remember weird characters showing up.
Well, there's that whole initial, when you start the game as fully loaded Samus.
When you're on the ship. Okay.
Yeah. You have the big like dragon eagle robot thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And all of the circumstances around that portion of the game, with the test facility and the parasite queen and all that stuff. And I'm like, what is going on here? This is bonkers. And then rewind, reset, scratch back to zero, crash on a different planet and try to piece all that stuff together. And yeah, that's cool. I think that has a lot of faith in players to like not beat them over the head with a, an on-screen crawl, which Metroid is occasionally guilty of, or tons of exposition, but just to sort of like dump you there and help you figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it works. It's such a minimal game, I feel like.
Yeah.
And like you were saying, whether that's because that was how they intentionally wanted to design it or whether it was more out of necessity.
Yeah.
Whichever one it was, it just suits Metroid so well.
Yeah. It plays really well. I think the remaster, it's been a while since I've had my hands on a GameCube controller trying to play Metroid Prime back in the day. Actually, I never played it on a GameCube controller. I only tried to play it with a Wiimote.
Oh, wow.
So I didn't have this on the GameCube. I had it on the Wii. You don't have two sticks on a Wiimote. Obviously, there was a version that came with the little nunchuck and you had the second stick and stuff like that. I don't remember if I ever did any of that. But the control scheme, the default control scheme in Metroid Prime is just first-person shooter controls. So you control, your feet with one stick and your head with the other, and it just feels kind of perfectly at home and perfectly like, this was built to be played in 2023.
Oh, all right. Well, that's good.
Yeah. So I dig it. I think
you still use the lock-on, like that's still in there, right?
Yeah, very much so. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, I think there's some interesting sort of stuff they do from a pacing perspective where if you have the scan visor down, you can't shoot. And there's always this pressure to sort of like catalog everything because it gives you, useful information, about the enemies that you're fighting. So as the thing is like flying or swarming or stomping or crawling towards you that you're trying to hopefully not die at the hands of, you're also trying to scan it and then switch back over to your cannon so you can shoot and kill it, because you can't do both simultaneously. So again, I like sort of the forced duality of that and you trying to sort of one, collect information, but two, survive.
Yeah.
Again, it feels like all the right stuff I want from a Metroid game.
Yeah. Yeah. I really enjoy the sort of like inquisitive aspects of it where there's this overall mystery, but you're also just like cataloging everything you run across because you're just like, What is this? Is this in the database yet? So different from anything else I was playing at the time.
Yeah.
Don't forget to scan those bosses.
Oh, I know. Yeah, there is that an immediate instinct to just start shooting away. But I'm like, no, you got to make sure you catalog all that stuff.
You can have an empty spot later on.
But I think I'm not sure which developer is responsible for the remaster here. That information can be a little hard to come by, I think, sometimes with Nintendo games. But I think a lot of love and a lot of polish went into this thing. And I think probably quite a bit of playtesting to make the controls feel accessible and make it feel modern and kind of shake off some of the weight of the Wiimote and the GameCube controller before it. I'm not sure which version of Metroid Prime this is built on. But it has aged pretty gracefully, and it looks really good on the Switch, I think. I'm playing it on the OLED, primarily in handheld, and it looks awesome on the screen.
Nice.
Yeah. So it's good. It's really cool. I mean, it's awesome that this is available. Hopefully it sort of whets people's appetite for Metroid Prime 4. Hopefully we get Prime 2 and 3 before 4 comes out.
Yeah, like, where are those?
Yeah, I would like to play all 3 of these. I've certainly never seen credits run. I am much further now in Metroid Prime Remastered than I ever got in Metroid Prime. So I think that's a good thing. Yeah, geez, it could not be any more fun to play.
Yeah. Oh man, that's great. That's good to hear.
Yeah. I didn't love Dread. Mm-hmm. I don't think you loved Dread either, did you?
No, I didn't really care for that one.
Yeah. I liked the 3DS one. What was the Samus Returns, right?
Yeah.
I think they did a really nice job with that. I played quite a bit of that.
I think I didn't love that one either, but I liked it more than Dread.
Yeah.
I don't know what it was about Dread. It was like the whole sort of like stalking robot system felt like kind of arbitrary. I felt like it was just the bosses did not feel like they belonged in a Metroid game. I don't know.
I just felt like I was really struggling with Dread. I think at some point they patched in an easier mode, and I went like, well, this is my chance. I can go back to it. And it's still really difficult. It is not an easy game.
It was really hard.
Yeah. So, I think I really just felt like I was just throwing myself at Dread over and over and over again and not getting anywhere, and it became frustrating.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's a great looking game. I think it's super cool. There are scenes in that game where you walk into rooms, and I'm thinking of the one kind of early in where you get the windows with the lava flowing behind you, and I'm like, wow, that's really cool. That looks really neat. I would love to see more of this, but man, I just kept getting my butt handed to me in Metroid Dread.
I got the impression that the developers were just like huge fans of Shovel Knight. Not Shovel Knight, Hollow Knight.
Interesting.
Which has like the bosses in that are supposed to be very challenging. And I definitely got that same sort of feeling from Metroid Dread, which is weird because like I don't think of Metroid like there's always been bosses, but it's not like die to this boss hundreds and hundreds of times until you get the pattern down. Because Metroid has never really been about combat. And I think, that's my take on it anyway.
Yeah, of course.
But you see that in Metroid Prime because you got the lock-on thing. There's a lot more emphasis on sort of exploration. And the bosses in it, I think are quite difficult compared to sort of the combat that you encounter throughout the rest of the game. It doesn't come anywhere close to the stuff, like the sort of boss design in Metroid Dread. A lot of them are almost like puzzles you just have to figure out sort of the weakness and how to exploit it while you are sort of dodging for your life. But yes. Overall, I feel like Prime is much more manageable.
That's been my impression of it thus far. There is an easy mode in Metroid Prime Remastered. I'm playing it on that. So,
okay, yeah, that might be the way to go.
Yeah, my health has seldom dipped below 80. So, and it's a 99 scale to start, so I'm doing okay. And I've upgraded my our armor a few times too, so I've got a couple of layers on top of that even. So nice. I feel pretty robust. I'm doing okay. Yeah. Some of the boss encounters I've had to kind of lather, rinse, repeat a few times, but they are relatively infrequent in Metroid Prime, at least at this point in the game.
Yeah.
And I never felt like I couldn't quite figure it out. Again, like, classic Zelda bosses, I sort of feel like if you get the timing right, get the pattern right, duck when you're supposed to. And Metroid Prime has the fun. If you're locked on, you can do like a boost dodge. So the original control scheme of the Metroid Prime games was really built around you being able to strafe around enemies. And that still kind of exists, obviously, in the modern controls for Prime Remastered. And it still works really well. So if you're locked on and you hit that, I believe the jump button, you sort of like zip to the side, zip to the left, zip to the right. And it's pretty good for like last second kind of like getting out of the way of some projectile coming your way.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. They do feel like kind of Zelda bosses. Whereas Dread was just like, learn what to do immediately or you will be instantly killed and have to walk back to the boss room.
Dread was all one-hit kills. Everything in that game was like, first shot, you die. Yep. And then you go back 20 minutes to the last point.
Oh, man. I guess that's what the fans want, though, apparently.
Yeah, I was so afraid of that in Metroid Prime because, again, those save areas are pretty infrequent. And I'm like, I really need to take a break. I really want to put this down and go play this other. I've been still working through Super Mario Odyssey lately, trying to 100% all of my moons.
Wow.
And I'm like, I need a little counter programming. I need to take some time away from Prime and go back to Mario for a bit. And I just couldn't get to a save room. I'm like, there's got to be one of this freaking maps somewhere. It took me a while, but
yeah, and at least you can, just put it to sleep if it really comes down to it.
Yeah. I can't play Mario then.
Yeah, well, true. I mean, it's not like you're going to lose your save file, though.
No, just you lose your progress. You have to go back to the last checkpoint.
Oh, but I mean, back in my day, you either left that GameCube running or, you got yourself to a save room.
Oh, yeah, of course. Absolutely.
Oh, man. Well, I'm really glad you're into it.
Yeah.
This is one of the cases where, I love the 2D Metroids. Super Metroid probably always my favorite. And I was in the skeptical camp when they said they're first going to make a 3D Metroid and it's a first person game. But it's one of the cases where I was like, well, they proved me wrong 100%. They just pulled it off, and I'm still kind of amazed at how well this turned out.
Yeah, I don't know that I had enough functioning knowledge of Metroid in 2002 to sort of appreciate what a shift this was. But now that I've played some of the 2D Metroid, as I've played Metroid 1, I played Metroid, is it Zero Mission? And there's one that just came out for the Nintendo Online service on the Switch too.
Metroid Fusion. It's pretty good.
Fusion. I believe I've played that as well. So I think I late, but I think I have a sense of the context here to a certain degree. And Prime, feels super familiar, but I think it survives the shift to first person really well.
Yeah, surprisingly well.
Cool. So I'm gonna keep plugging away at this. I'm gonna see credits roll on my first Metroid Prime game. As God is my witness.
Nice. Yeah. This kind of falls into the same bucket as the Resident Evil 4 remake, where I'm like, oh, do I want to play this again? It's basically the same game. It's not even a remake, so it would just be replaying it for me. So I don't feel an urgent need, but also I'm like, oh, it has been quite a while. I mean, probably about as long as it's been since I played Resident Evil 4, so maybe it's time. I would really like, I am hoping they come out with the 2 and 3 reissues at some point, because I didn't play much of those.
Yeah, that would be cool. It would be nice to have access to all 3 of those again. I think Nintendo has a bad habit of just letting games disappear with their old consoles. So, let's keep Metroid Prime alive, please.
Yeah, that I have to hook up the Wii U again.
Yeah. While your chances on that are that your window is rapidly closing.
I mean, I have it. I just,
is it sitting on your Wii U?
Yeah.
That's probably a good pro tip. Did we call that out in our Wii U and 3DS episode? If you want access to all 3 of these Metroid Prime games in HD, they are on the Wii U eShop.
I think we did, yeah. That version, the physical version, basically does not exist anymore. So it's a way to go. Have a few more days to get it from the eShop at this point when this episode comes out.
Cool. Let's wrap this thing up. If you need any more video game hangover in your brain, you should follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/VGHangover. And you can always get show notes and links and tell us what you thought about this episode at VGHangover.com. We would love for you to hang out with us on Discord, chat about video games and other stuff. You can get a link to that at VGHangover.com. And we would love for you to subscribe, rate, and review us on your podcasting app of choice. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all that other fun stuff. It really helps get the word out, and maybe help us out by telling your friends about the show.
Yeah, that's the best way for us to pick up new listeners, just word of mouth. So we appreciate it. You just bug your friends. We want to give thanks again to Carl Brueggemann for our intro and outro music this week. If you'd like to hear more of his work, you can go to carlbmusic.bandcamp.com. That's Carl with a K. And download some more of his stuff. That would be great.
Excellent. We'll be back next week. Until then, this is Randy Dickinson.
This is DJ Ross.
Thanks for listening to Video Game Hangover. Goodbye.
Good night.
See ya.